to be with you in this new EHTEL webinar. We are together with Luc, Nicolas, and myself, and we have a panel of experts for the debate and also contributions at the beginning of the session. The topic today is the role of data intermediaries. And this webinar is part of the health data spaces and ecosystems that we are working this year within the EHTEL Imagining 2029, which will end at the end of November, 30th of November and 1st of December on our EHTEL symposium that we will explain you a little bit more later on. So let's frame the context of the session today. We are talking about data. Basically, we are all aware of the data-rich world we are living in now. This is no news, and the expectations and the forecast is that data will be growing. But there are many issues, particularly in the healthcare field, related to data interoperability, the fact that data is allocated in different organizations, databases. So this is a challenge to make data flow. And also we have other sort of challenge related to the role of citizens as holders of data and being able to share this data for other purposes from the original one, so for care or research. So we would like to bring this into your attention, and particularly with the participation and role of data intermediaries to address these issues, either if this is between organizations or is involving the citizens to some extent. This webinar is supported by two projects, the Interoperate project, which is a research and innovation project, and which main goal is to make electronic health record data accessible to citizens in order to share with other healthcare providers or health research centers, and also the coordination and support action OpenDI, which Interoperate is also part of this project. So let's start today. I invite Luc to join me in the presentation. We will be explaining a little bit about data intermediaries.
Giving the word to Angelo, who will actually try to provide an overview where the question of data intermediaries lies exactly in the European health data space picture. I am digitally skilled, but I have already now more than 50 years, unfortunately, of life. And I went through quite a number of things, and I have quite an experience, and I've been producing a lot of data already in my digital life on social networks, but also I left behind me a lot of medical data. I have also interesting information at several government offices, and I don't know how I can actually. I don't have a clear vision of all those data myself, and although people tell me I can make a contribution, a social contribution, and that those data could be extremely useful to just the single stuff I'm personally busy with, I don't know how to do that. But I'm concerned because I'm living in a world where risk is present. And although I'm ready to do that, I am concerned about privacy, security, complexity also. Giving data will probably mean a lot of investment from myself in order to understand what is it about, what I need to do. And well, is this going to be easy to handle if I need to contribute? And how can I be sure that if I finally find a way to do it, that it will be legitimate, and it will, and the people who use my data will do it according to my wishes. So that's a bit the starting point. But then I propose, that we give back, no, please stop, that we give then back the floor to Angelo, who will introduce the subject from a more global perspective. So.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Angelo Marguglio. I'm from engineering. And I'm a member of the consortium of India that has been mentioned by Tino in the introduction, and I will try to drive you through, I would say, the best of breeds of the initiatives at the European level that is trying to make a step forward in the interaction, technical and business-wise, on how to build and operate data spaces, not only in the health domain, but with a cross-sectorial view. So as already introduced, I will try to keep it short, since I want really to go, I would say, toward the panel discussion that we will have in the workshop. But I want to give, as mentioned, few highlights that can bring some value in the discussion itself. So starting from OpenDI is, as mentioned, is a coordinated support action that started in the half of 2019, and I would say is an halfway of its life. So we have still almost 18 months. Is coordinated by IDC, and as you can see, there are several big players from technical perspective, but also from organizational perspective, European-wise. And we are really trying to support the activity toward the adoption of digital transformation tools in 4 main domains: health, manufacturing, agri-food, and energy. And as you can already imagine, these 4 sectors, as many the other industrial sector in Europe, has a lot of challenges as needs in understanding how to make a trustful data sharing and data exchange, and how this can be really impact our businesses and our life. But which is the starting point? European Commission and our President Ursula von der Leyen is pushing to have a real data economy driven by the European values. And one of the tools that we can leverage to build this data economy is the adoption and the operation of data space, as mentioned, following our values and our legal framework that is one of the best at the worldwide level. We have also started last year a new initiative that is called Digital Compass 2030, that is trying to push, which is the vision and the way that Europe can foster digital transformation toward what they call the digital decade. And the 4 main pillars of this communication is about skills, how we as citizens, as human and workers can really contribute to this scenario, which are the business impact of adopting a more data-oriented business mindset, which are the digital infrastructure, the trustworthy and sovereign digital infrastructure that can support this business, and also which is the policy perspective, how the government can support and how we as a citizen can also contribute in this respect. We know, I mean, from the OpenDI, we made a lot of research in the first month of the project. We have a lot of many backgrounds in terms of how to build digital solution, digital platform, but I want to keep it really, I would say, not technically focused, but business focused. We have a lot of backgrounds, a lot of standards, but the main enablers that we have identified as a driver for the digital transformation, for sure, data platform. And we have a great experience of, in our real life, in our initiative, in our organization, of data platforms. But we want to move from data platforms to centralized data platform toward data sharing, where multiple platforms, multiple organizations can share information using common principle, but opening also what we call now data space, where we can build business on top of these data sharing functionalities. But how we as OpenDI are supporting this vision? We have established several tools. One of that is the task force that is trying to collect knowledge from experts, from projects, from our organization in our ecosystem, many research projects, many business organizations that are built, I would say, in the end of last year. This design principle for data spaces is a position paper identify which is the soft infrastructure that can be used to support interoperability, trustworthiness, and give value to the data that we can exchange between the different organizations, but adopting a common governance model and rules. You can find also in the slides the link to learn more about these achievements. But I want also to point out another second important finding, that is the establishment at European level of the GAIA X initiative and association that is trying to push how our digital infrastructure and solution can really bring the value to our business, to our organization, to deal with data, to data-driven value chain. And we've seen that we can move in a very high level perspective from how to collect data, how we can create correlation and services on top of this data, how we can build business data space and ecosystem on top. And as you can see in the example in the top layer, healthcare is exactly one of the domains that is tackled by GAIA-X and many other initiatives in Europe. But which is the real value of this approach? We want to move from a one-way communication where the user, the citizen, is able to provide data to the data platform, to the provider of the service, toward a more circular and open sovereign data exchange between the different actors of the value chain, and where the user became a prosumer, where it's not the user that let control to the data platform owner, but the user get control of what is really able to, the data provider, what is really able to perform on top of this data, as Luke already mentioned, which is the vision, which is the contract that is between the user and the intermediary or the user or the service provider, and how this data can really be used. So it's not only an access problem, but it's more on a usage control problem on how to make it operational. The third finding that we have found that there are already many security and privacy models that can be applied at a different level of the data platform or even data space. But in most of them, the role of the intermediaries is one of the most critical point. We have obviously to take into account which are the audit function of the platform, of the infrastructure, of the tools, but also which is the control that we can give to the user, to the data provider, the data owner, in order to facilitate the data collection. Obviously, we want to give value to our data, we want to share this data, but we can also have control on who and why another organization can access to this data. And in terms of solutions already available in the market, again, there are already plenty of examples of also valid, I would say, business-wise example of solution that can be used in many sectors, and obviously among them also in the healthcare domain. But we don't want to be exhaustive. The most important message is that we have to find a convergence path on how to deal with a different approach on how data sharing can be realized for our obviously interest. Regarding the European landscape, there are again several organizations, several examples on how data space can be brought to real life, and 4 of them association, namely the Big Data Valley Association, International Database Association, Fiber Foundation, GAIA-X, are established a new alliance recently, I would say last month, to try to build together which is the business driver, the business value of establishing pure European data space that can also bring value to this cross-sectorial perspective. And 3 of them are part of our consortium, and most of our partners and some of the also people that are with us today belong to this association. But it's important to understand that the European Commission is really pushing toward moving these synergies to concrete actions. The last takeaway that I want then to use to move to the next section is, which is all about, is starting on how to share and access data. So we need some business driver, a business culture that can go over the silos that has been mentioned by Tino in the very first slide. We need common principle, and the position paper, the rule books that many organizations is delivering is exactly to try to define this common approach. But we need also digital and sovereign digital infrastructure, cloud, edge, whatever, and in order to connect and compute and to create this federation of services and platform. But we need also to have certification and labeling schema that can really give this trust to the end user, to the end organization, in order with the final aim also to create an ecosystem based on data. And I will stop here to move to the next.
Thank you very much, Angelo. And Tino, I think you can go back to the other slides. And indeed, intermediaries, it's in the health sector, that's not a new phenomenon. I mean, we have been using people to transform data in the health sector since a long time, since already. If I just look at the budget needed in Belgium, just for the only purpose to have data coded to be sent to the Ministry of Health, just to be reimbursed, that represents more than 40 million euro in human resources today which are invested in intermediaries, meaning doctors which are today coding data from other doctors only to provide data which can be interpreted in one specific silo, in one ecosystem. Today, this we understand that we need to extend on that, but to look at something much more generic in this data sharing perspective. If we look now at the Commission and what they had in mind in the Data Governance Act, they're dealing with 3 key areas. One, which is already key, which is how can we make access to data held by public sectors more easy. The second one is clearly how can we structure those services with the use of data intermediaries so that actually we begin to have those services implemented. And thus indeed there comes the notion of accreditation of those very important trusted actors. And I think the Commission considers that those actors are a prerequisite in order to start basically doing things beyond what is already existing. And finally, and that's extremely important in our domain, how to encourage data altruism, as we are mostly in the health domain, working on services before working on products. So the concept of data altruism is of peculiar importance in our domain. So Tino.
Yeah. So here, the first question is, what are exactly data intermediaries? We recommend a report that was published this July 2021 by the Center for Digital Ethics and Innovation, that is called Unlocking the Value of Data, exploring the role of data intermediaries. And they convey the message that there is not a clear-cut definition of data intermediaries, that this can cover a very wide range of activities and governance model involving public, private, third sector organizations. But the main goal is that they enable responsible data access and sharing, and they have a specific role in managing and protecting individual rights and privacy. On top of this, they can apply other measures to protect against unethical use, as Luke was mentioning before. In practical terms, what they are here for. First, they help to find data that can be personal or non-personal. Some models, and we will see different categories of data intermediaries, they can provide a technical infrastructure that support all these interoperability elements that they address, and also help to share access and pool data, managing usage rights, and acting basically as data custodians. And in some cases, and we will see some examples, they can also offer independent analytical service in this fragmented environment. So in a form of federated learning system, they help to exchange data, but protecting the privacy of the data from maluse. They can also help in reducing cost and risk associated to data processing. So they are bringing skills to the data analysis, and they also assume the roles of and obligations of data controllers and processors. In terms of which are the barriers that they are trying to overcome, the first is a matter of incentives. In this way to work, it's difficult to share data, so they help aligning incentives to cooperate between parties, whether they are organizations or are individuals. They address knowledge gaps, also standardization elements, improving the quality and portability of data, addressing commercial, ethical, reputational, legal, and regulatory risk, limiting the purposes of this data sharing, and also applying privacy-enhancing technologies. We will see some examples too. In terms of data access and sharing, through the creation of these trust research environments, they address elements of cost of access and sharing, and they can also help to reduce the missed opportunities, as the Data Governance Act mentioned, for the public good. Now let's see the taxonomy of data intermediaries. Here I hand over to you, Luke.
Yes, actually, we'll try to look at it from maybe a different different angle from what the Data Governance Act says, which, although it's interesting, so as you can see there, it's on the right side on the screen. We tried to look at it from what we see is existing now on the market. And actually, well, this is highly subjective. We recognize that the way we just categorize them. The first category is basically the one which have been existing since a while. They've been working on the standardization of data. So it's a very important element, and a precondition for data sharing, but it's not really focusing on the data sharing itself, I would say. It's more on the processing of data. While the data custodians, they are also covering a wide variety of organizations. Some of them store data, some of them do not store data, but they create a trusted environment where the customers and the data providers and the data consumers will meet, and where the transactions will be performed in as efficient way as possible. So we will look into quite a number of examples, and that will be one of the central focus of the presentation. The other one that we want to present you today a bit more detail is the PIMS, the Personal Information Management Systems, where basically here those PIMS try to put really the citizen at the center, and to bring all those data in one single one single access point for the citizen, so that he can actually decide what he wants to share and for what. So he's put in a position to do it. And finally, the data collaboratives, which the data cooperatives in particular, that we will explore in detail during the symposium in December. We will not speak about it too much today, and we will speak it in much more detail during the symposium. Next slide, please. You muted, Tino.
True, sorry. So let's explore this first category of data custodians, and let's see it from the angle of having access to data that you could not have access if it's not pooled by this data custodian. Here you have the example of a researcher that wants to access data but cannot access the data directly, and this custodian is helping to aggregate this data, providing a technical infrastructure for data analysis, and providing also the reports that will be generated based on the code that the researcher is sending to this environment. So data is not traveling, it remains under the custodian frame, but the results are exchanged with the researcher. To give you some examples, and we wanted to bring here specifically in the domain of healthcare, we can see three remarkable examples. One is called OpenSafely. This is an initiative, an English initiative that pool and analyze data coming from electronic health records of the NHS. Also, you may know the Amazon Web Service, and a specific service called Data Exchange, that we will study a little bit, and Genomics England for the human genome and for research. So let's look to the first one, OpenSafely. This is an initiative, actually an academic initiative by the University of Oxford and the Data Lab, and is publicly funded. OpenSafely is a secure, transparent, and open source software platform for the analysis of electronic health records data. It's a set of best practice encoded as a software, and it can be deployed to create a trusted research environment alongside appropriate database, compute, governance, and administrative elements. The OpenSafely software is currently deployed within these secure data centers of the two largest electronic health record providers, PPP and EMIS. to support urgent research, for instance, into the COVID-19 emergency. So it addressed commercial, ethical, and reputational risk, legal and regulatory risk, and also overcome the missed opportunity of using data for the public interest. You have the website on the bottom of the slides that will be shared after the webinar today. A second example, as we mentioned, is the Amazon Data Exchange. This is not strictly a health related initiative. It applies to all sectors, but they have specific use cases for in the area of healthcare. And here, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, and health insurers can access these services and plan clinical trials, build insurance plans, research new drugs, or improve patient lives. And they do so by combining their own data with products that they can subscribe on the Amazon Web Service Data Exchange. Some relevant products contain data on drug switching patterns, fitness benchmark, life expectancy benchmarks, and aggregated claims data. One of these examples is this initiative from Deloitte called Converge Health, that through an API that is integrated, have to find, subscribe, and use third-party data analyzed in the cloud. Here, this data intermediary is addressing the lack of knowledge, reducing significantly the cost of data access and sharing through the cloud services, and again, helping to make a better use of public data. And a third example is Genomics England. Genomics England is a pure public initiative. It belongs and it's owned by the United Kingdom Department of Health and Social Care. Genomics England is a data custodian. They collect sensitive data on the human genome for research purposes, and as part of the project 100,000 genomes. It sequences genomic data from individuals with rare disease or cancer to facilitate breakthroughs in medical treatment, and especially in the domain of personalized medicine. They work with the NHS to identify potential participants. Participants, they must consent to have their DNA sequenced, and they can always opt out from participating in the project at any time. Genomics England operates as a trust research environment, as we said before, and they grant public and private researchers access to its anonymized data for a specific research project. Which is important is that data is never removed from the original place, and it secures data centers to monitor all the activity that is undertaken by researchers. It addressed the lack of incentives to share data, the different commercial and legal risk, and also reach the missed opportunity of using data for the public interest. And now we move to the PIMS model. So we have seen the more a B2B approach. The PIMS model involves closely citizens, and I ask Luke to introduce the PIMS model for us.
Yes. So here, the focus here is that we, as I already introduced a bit in the previous slide, is that we have all a very big difficulty to have a full overview of the data that we have been producing directly or indirectly. When I say indirectly, is that when you meet your GP, you're not encoding the data, he's doing it for you under his own responsibility, and he's adding his own judgment on top of it. So it's not only, it's a bit part of him also. So we're leaving data behind us, but we don't know where they are sometimes, and we don't necessarily know how to have the control, because we need to enter into every time a different system in order to understand how this system works, and in order to understand also how we can get a bit of control of the data inside. So the idea is to respond to a demand for mechanism to rebalance the current power imbalance between the individuals and the corporations, and mainly the GAFA, just to be very clear, who have and I would say on the market almost a quasi monopoly today on the personal data market, I would say. So returning control to users by enabling all information to be stored in one location that they choose, and which will manage through a single interface. This is the very simple idea of the PIMS. So through these PIMS, then you can provide fine-grained control over who has access to that, to what and when. And you also directly, of course, capable to withdraw this authorization at any time. You can also make sure that you can erase all the data that you want to be erased. And you can also enable automatic opt-outs on data sharing for users that may be considered undesirable. Finally, it also can seriously improve usability, for example, by providing a fine-grained identity management feature. Next slide, please. So this model that you see summarized here is basically about the capacity to import data that we have in different systems, so social media, but also banks, energy supplier, electricity, well, like electricity, hospitals, well, name it, and it can be it, I would say. And in the same time, just interact with a number of other data consumers, which can be your doctor, but your insurer, or a researcher, of course, whoever would like to make use of those data. So that's the overall model of the PIMS. Next slide, please. And we here again going to give very quickly 3 examples. The first one is not a tool, is not per se an application, I would say, or a platform. It's more a toolkit called Nestati Code that I personally find interesting to read, because it's meant to guide whoever wants to build a PIM in a meaningful way. So it provides guidance and resources for public and private organizations to prepare and design data sharing initiatives. So it helps you to frame actually your questions in the right way. Who to involve, what is the appropriate data infrastructure you need, what is the overall governance structure that is adapted to what you want to do, what data to share, why do we need to share those data, and who and how is the data can be accessed, those kind of questions. So it's a really interesting tool just to understand exactly how a PIM can be built. And it answers basically to 3 key barriers: the lack of incentive to share data, the lack of knowledge, and again, the missed opportunities to use data in the public interest. Next slide, please. So you will find a number of examples if you go on their website. They have been testing this toolkit and implementing these PIMS adapted to a number of pilots like digital democracy and data commons, or the use of anonymous proof of identity, for example, which is quite interesting. We won't get time to get into detail, but I certainly encourage you to have a deeper look at this initiative. The other one is already on the shelf. It's already a widespread product. It's called DigiMe. And it's, as been said by Angelo, at the end of the last slide of Angelo, there was the word ecosystem. You remember what? And that's basically what DigiMe wants to do. Is they are building an ecosystem in order, well, to do 2 things. As a citizen, you can download the application DigiMe and begin to collect data coming from a number of data sources. And at the same time, you offer a number of services to developers who can use those services in order to develop their solution in a way which is compatible with the DigiMe governance approach. And by doing so, you begin part of that ecosystem in a way. So you begin to be able to also share, to be able to be a potential data consumer or data provider in that ecosystem. What is interesting is that it's already used in the healthcare domain in quite a number of places. In England, in particular, and in Iceland, it has been used by Iceland as the solution for the personal health record storage and sharing by the authorities. So it's an example also of a public-private partnership in some cases. It's also used in the USA, and it's, for example, in the Netherlands, they are compliant with the MedMay specification. So they have done that exercise also. So I've done the test actually to see what DGME is like. It's indeed quite easy, because actually you don't need, and for example, any organization which gives you access to this system potentially can connect to DGME. So it's quite simple to enter into the DGME ecosystem. Now it is clear that beyond that, there is also a business layer, which is the specificity of that initiative, which is a for-profit initiative, although the citizen itself can, of course, make the best use out of it. Next slide, please. And finally, the SOLID project, which is also an interesting new development. It's only at the phase of a project, as it's more a specification. So it gives you the possibility here to store the data securely in a decentralized data store, which is called a pod. So I tested it also. It's really easy to get a pod. You can use one of the pod which is proposed, and most of it's not Drive, I would say, or one of the one that we know. It's some of the others, I would say. You can decide to self-host if you have the infrastructure to do it, your pod. And based on that specification, then the SMEs or the industry itself can develop their own application using that specification to develop their own model and their own product, which will be compatible with that specification. So it's another example which is open and ongoing, which has some chance to have some kind of success, as it's strongly supported by the people who have created internet in a way. So it's currently piloted also in the healthcare domain, in a few places, but also in the government domain. For example, in Manchester, UK, it's currently used to do exactly what DGME does in Iceland, just getting the data of the PHR for the citizen of Manchester. And in Flanders, Belgium, it's used to collect the data from all the different kinds of organizations and administration in Flanders, so that the citizen has a full overview of all the services, although they are all using different kinds of systems. So it is a really booming new field, actually, the PIMS, and there are many other developments. Interoperate that will come, that will speak in the panel just afterwards, is also in a way an example of a PIMS in full development, and a very promising one. So Tino.
Yeah, just to wrap up, as a concluding remarks, we can see the role that data intermediaries they can play as an accelerator of data-driven innovation, overcoming many obstacles we have seen, but particularly the facts of standards adoption or interoperability. We have seen that the transparency and these public-private partnerships and the level of trust that they can generate is critical to provide this service to markets. And we can envision too how they are health data ecosystem generators, and they can enable this citizen-centric health data sharing approach, particularly with these examples of the PIMS as personal information management system. So this is in a nutshell what we wanted to discuss today on data intermediaries, and we would like now to move into the discussion. We are still with 15 minutes ahead of us for this Q&A session. We have 4 experts, Angelo that spoke before, but we have Isabel Seger from Blova, Nicolas Molindris from the Centric in Switzerland, and Gabo Bella from University of Trento, and also partner in the project Interoperate. Luke, I hand over to you for the moderation of the session.
Thank you. So I would like to ask Isabel to begin with, if she agrees. Yeah.
Fine. Ladies first, right?
Yes, ladies first. Exactly.
Okay.
So, Isabel, you are very much active within the TEDAS joint action around the question of patient centricity. And what role do you think that those PIMS will play in the next 2 years?
Okay, maybe before I answer your question, look, I probably need to mention that I'm also a member of an organization called My Data, which is a non-profit organization, which is global one, and which actually is working on everything which is giving more control to citizens about their personal data. One of the very important things they've been doing is working on the model of what is now called data intermediaries, that they call data operators. And what are the basic functionality, identity management, consent management, service management? I can send you the link. By the way, DGME is one of the founder of My Data. So everything that you see in My Data, in DGME would be in My Data. And I think it's extremely important to actually come with some reference model, because I think what one of the things your presentation showed is that it's all over the place. Solid has nothing to compare to DGME, because Solid is very technical protocol, but very important. DGME is a business solution. And so it was so important to have those different basic services. And there are several My Data operator. DGME is one, but there are other ones in healthcare as well. Now, what is the role of those data intermediaries? And again, very much based on the work we are doing in My Data, I think they are going to be, to make a metaphor very simple, they are going to be the bank of all data for tomorrow. Think about your cash. Your cash is an asset, and you need a bank to actually manage your bank, to actually do payment. But you need a bank to help you to invest, right? And to increase the value of your data. Now think about your data as an asset. You need somebody to actually manage that. That would be the data intermediary. But you also need a data intermediary to bring your data, or my data have no value by themselves except for me. But if I put that at the population level, they start to have value for pharma company, but only data intermediary can actually do that. And they can also provide me services to increase the value of my data. And so I think for me, the data intermediary are going to play a critical role in healthcare of tomorrow to actually help citizens to create a true longitudinal health record. And I think it was you, Luke, mentioning that you have no idea of where all your data are. Tomorrow, I would think that about 500 years ago, you would not know where your cash would be, or where your money or your asset would be. Now, with banks, it's much more clear. With personal data intermediary, I would hope that you will have all the tools completely manage your data properly. And I'll stop there. I can go on and on and on.
Maybe just a short complementary question before shifting to another example. But do you think that it is the right evolution to see a data intermediary trying to answer to all the different needs in order for the data to be exploitable? We see, for example, DGME claiming that they built an ontology capable to at least to provide the metadata necessary in order to ensure a massive number of transactions between data producers and consumers, whatever sector those data could come from. So, which is extremely ambitious as a statement, while we have seen people investing in decades just as a data intermediary trying to work on data normalization and data, you see what I mean? So
Yeah,
are we going to see those intermediary bringing all the services in once?
I would, again, answer like you, like in the banks. I would say potentially yes, but they better be interoperable, because if I want to change the bank tomorrow, it's not easy. I've done it. It's a pain, certainly in Belgium. But I want to be able to do that. What I want is a provider that I can trust and that can provide me with the right services to manage my asset. If at some point in time I don't like it anymore, I want to be able to actually move to another one. So that's why it is not, and I think that needs to be regulated, and it is regulated in a way by that Data Governance Act. They need to be completely portable, so you can port your data from one to another one, and therefore it's not in their advantage to actually be and have things like proprietary ontology, which, by the way, for DGME, that's what they build, but it's built on a lot of standard based on Snow methodology, and so in a way it's not truly proprietary because it's based on standards. But yes, I would say I want to trust them completely. I don't care about my data. I just care about the value I can get from it.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabelle. Then, Nicolas, I'm happy to have you also with us today. You're working with a company called Decentric, established in Switzerland, and you are already an established data custodian.
Yes.
So you're basically providing a safe environment in order to provide a result to a request, basically. So can you tell us, in your perspective, is already the market ready for these solutions? And is what you're proposing right on time?
No, thank you for having me, first of all. Very good question. So about the market readiness, I mean, before I go to that, I really want to say that I really liked what Isabelle said in terms of banks and how we would position what Decentric does for the rest of the people who probably haven't searched about it yet. We provide the intermediary, providing the platform that you can analyze data between different banks, as Isabelle called them. And banks can be the data that a literal bank has, or a hospital, or a pharmaceutical. How do you ensure that those people work together and drive insights out of this combined data when you have those banks not trusting each other? We try to remove that need for trusting each other and trusting Decentric, and give them the tools to analyze their combined data sets. So that is a bit of a primer on what Decentric platform does. And in terms of where the market is ready, I have two things to say. One is, in terms of when I speak with, in a professional level or even on a personal level, I see a lot of people still being not educated about what can be done. So I have people saying, hey, my data is all over the place. There's nothing I can do about it. And there's a lot of forums like this and panels like this that help bringing awareness of there are solutions, there are ways of doing this, and there are to secure your data and at the same time get the insights that you really want. So that's education is a very key point, but it's growing. And the second one is that the market is ready for data flows that already exist. So there's a lot of places, there's a lot of businesses where there's already an established process of how you utilize data. You start from there. We start from there, making it simpler, more secure. And then when you provide the solution to the market, you see, and we see that there's always people who say, hey, I really like this. It's easier, it's faster, it's more secure. And now I can also do this. And we see this also working with health data, that you can do many more things when people start understanding that what can be possible with the new technologies that exist out there now and the new frameworks that exist out there now. So in that case, I think we are on time because there is a growing momentum, and all here we know it, a growing momentum on these kind of technologies, on these kind of issues. But at the same time, there is now the technology available to really make it happen. And I think it's a perfect time to shape this and to be at the space.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Gabor, thank you also to be with us. Gabor is working, is from the University of Trento and is working in the project Interoperate. And when I've been preparing this webinar, it came to my mind that actually Interoperate itself could be considered as a PIMS. So what would you say? And I mean, in a way, quite complete, because you are also addressing the data processing part in a way, but also the data sharing in the same package, I would say. So could you explain us?
Yes. So thanks for having me. I'm a computer scientist, so I have this technological perspective on everything. So while I was listening to all these interesting presentations on the existing technologies and initiatives, I was thinking, what is missing? So why is it not flying already? Given that we have all these technologies and possibilities. So because clearly there's a demand, right? That's not a problem. So there's a demand for data already shared. So in research, public, private, by technology providers, in the data-driven market, etc. There's also a technological supply, as you very well presented it, all of you. So there are lots of interesting things to deploy and to use. So what is missing? So what I think is missing is the data itself to be shared for multiple reasons. So there's the patient side, right? And sharing by the patient, and here we join the PIMS idea. And but the sharing can also be done by larger data controllers, so healthcare organizations, hospitals, etc. So to talk about the PIMS side and how Interoperate joins this. So the Interoperate project is about controlling the patient's own control over their data and their own decision of sharing the data for various purposes, including research. So this it is truly a good example.
But that's also you also deal with all the data normalization part.
Yes. So on the one side there is this there is the giving the opportunity to the user, to the patient, to share data for the purposes of research. So we are experimenting this through a mobile device. So we are experimenting this in the Interoperate project. But we at the University of Trento are responsible, in particular, in this project of so what you're mentioning, the data conversions, data integration in general. And here we join another major problem, I think. So in terms of the technology for sharing data, there are so I see a little bit of over optimism and a little bit of over pessimism. And the first one comes more from technologists, usually like us, and standardization bodies. And the more pessimists are those actually who know the most about their data, the healthcare practitioners, the experts, the hospitals, because they see how deep the problem is and how hard it is to extract data from the silos And the more general you try to be in terms of usages and in terms of also going cross borders, so geographically. So the more general you try to be, the harder it is to do it. And this is what we are trying to attack in the Interoperate project. So we are going for a hard case, which is cross-border sharing of data. And we so the kind of tools we are trying to provide are trying to make the process of preparing data, integrating data more agile. So with less human intervention, all the while keeping the precision high, which is of course a particularity of the healthcare domain, that you cannot afford losing or corrupting data during these processes.
Thank you, Gabor. Now I would like to come back to something else, which is really striking me, that we are all a bit prisoners from our apps today. I mean, if we use an app, the data usually goes with the app, right? I mean, and the PIMS model is basically saying, well, no, let's stop there. Now we need to find a way to have a different ecosystem where an app and data, that's two separate things. They can help to generate the data, but the data remain under my control. So that leads to the question of how are we going to govern that? I mean, the Commission itself believes that we need to go towards an accreditation of those data intermediaries in order basically to provide trust to the people, because otherwise, as a citizen, how can I know who can be trusted? We'll come back, Isabel, in the EHTEL symposium on data cooperatives. So it will be a different model that we will explore together. But altogether, let's think about data trust in general. How can we believe in them? How can, and if we don't have a formal certification process? So how do you see that coming up today? I open it to all of you, huh?
I could go first because it's the fastest one. Our whole company is based on the fact that you shouldn't trust. Accreditation is indeed let's say, the lawyer's way, if you want. But there's technological, and we use technological means to take away this trust. And when Tino spoke about PETs, privacy enhancing technologies, this is, I think, a very good base. And there's multiple companies, not just Decentric, that try to take away this whole trust without the need to have a, let's say, a legal contract or accreditation for it. There are technological means to not need this kind of trust as a citizen. Of course, auditing is another story, but there are ways to do that technologically, and that's where we go to.
Okay.
If I may, I think that, yes, I agree that there is a legal component in trust, but there is a major emotional component as well. And even if you can have certified organization that you would not trust, an uncertified organization that citizen would trust, maybe for the wrong reason. So I think it's important to look at the different aspect about trust versus, is it legal, is it ethical? And I think there is a minimum that is needed there, which is indeed, call it certification or regulation or whatever. We need some minimum component that makes that it is ethical and it's legal. And then on top of that, and then you have data trust law and those kind of things that could come into it. But then on top of that is, how do you generate trust from an emotional perspective? And I believe we're not speaking enough about the human-computer interaction that needs to happen. You kind of mentioned that partially, Luke, saying, I want to have in one app access to everything, and I want to trust the everything. How do you trust? I mean, what you trust, Luke, may be different than what I will trust. So that is probably the part where we also need to learn by doing and failing and succeeding about how you build trust with different type of application, because they're different. Look at bot technology. Sometimes, you know, I've read a paper saying that it was done by MIT or Harvard Business School. A teenager would actually prefer to have a relationship with bots because they would trust them more than human being, because at least they won't be betrayed. Mm-hmm. I think that was very far, but that's also about trust. It's not just about certification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I may also complement, I mean, another aspect that we should probably take into account is the economics driver. I mean, every one of us or our organization is willing or not to establish this dynamic data sharing and data usage on how or which are the services that can be built on top of this data, but which is the real economics driver, I would say, that is supporting this willingness or this trustedness between the different system or the users, citizens, toward this organization. So also this economic driver, and especially when I think about the example of the bank, like Isabel mentioned, again, which is the real corrosive action that this structure or overstructure can bring in terms of value or not on top of the data sharing space.
Thank you very much.
So I think like a final message, and we have mentioned this several times, but if you like the session today and you want to explore it deeper, we have organized a specific session number 2 on enabling citizens to be in better control of their own health data, and we will be covering data cooperatives and dynamic consent in the 2021 Thought Leaders EHTEL Symposium, 30 of November is session 2. We have shared with you in the chat the link to the registration for the EHTEL, which is free and online. So we encourage you to participate in our annual symposium. And we want to thank you to all of you participants and panelists for the session. It was really interesting and insightful, and it's a whole new domain that we have to explore together further. So thank you very much.